Okay, so today I'm going to be reviewing this, the 1963 Porsche-Elva Mark VII. And even though a lot of people won't even know what this is, these were actually probably some of the best racing Porsches of the 1960s, or at least in the 2.0 liter and under class, because of their agility, their insane speed, their at least 0 to 60 was quite good for the time, and they were insanely light. I won't tell you guys how much, but I'll tell you guys, they weigh as much as, like, if you took a Miata and cut a quarter of it off, well, that's how much they weigh. So, in today's video, I'm going to be telling you guys everything you need to know about this car, from the specs, the history, the design, and much more. So let's go. And first thing first, of course, we have to talk about is the specs, because, well, this car is powered by a 1.7 liter air-cooled flat 4 that's, well, mid-mounted. And, well, that makes 180 horsepower and about 145 pound-feet of torque. And, well, that goes through the rear wheels only through a 5-speed manual transmission to help this car rocket to 0 to 60 in about 5.5 seconds, which really, for its time, was wildly quick, because even something like a brand new Subaru WRX has 0 to 60 in 5.9 seconds. So this is seriously fast for its time and seriously lightweight. And, well, you have that wild 0 to 60, but then you guys are probably wondering, what's the top speed? And the top speed is between, well, 140 and 145 miles an hour, so let's say 143 miles an hour top speed, which really is insane for this car. I mean, something like a new Nissan Altima could reach 120, but still, this thing was a complete beast in its time and even now. And, well, I just want to tell you guys one thing before we get a little deeper into the specs. These were meant for racing, but they're insanely popular at club racing and like SCAA, like Sports Club of America and stuff like that. You guys are probably wondering, well, it pretty much all boils down to how fast a quarter mile of this thing is, because, yeah, the car could have a 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds, but if the quarter mile isn't fast, then that pretty much equates to nothing. And, well, the quarter mile of this thing right here is 14 seconds. So 14 seconds, and this thing will finish the quarter mile. And even though that might not seem rocket quick, something like a brand new Lamborghini Temerario will have a quarter mile in about 10 seconds. So this thing is only about 4 seconds slower, which, I mean, it is kind of a big gap, but still, I mean, this thing was crazy quick for its age. And, well, I told you guys pretty much everything you need to know about the specs of this car, at least how fast it is. Now you guys are probably wondering, well, I mean, no one's probably going to ever buy this car because it's only one of, I can't tell you yet, but one of under 30 ever produced. But, well, what is it like economically? And really, well, I mean, it's not too great. You get about 17 miles per gallon, 15 to 17 miles per gallon. I'm not sure exactly where that is, but between that amount. So the miles per gallon is relatively good. The range, though, is one thing that, of course, isn't great. I mean, it was really good on endurance racetracks, but you don't have to drive insanely far. But, well, the range of this thing is approximately 150-ish miles, I'll tell you guys. And, well, I mean, it's not horrible, but still not really great. I mean, this was never meant to be an actual road car, but still, for a race car, I mean, it is relatively good. And so, I think I've told you guys everything you need to know about the car, at least specs-wise. Now you guys are probably wondering, well, how many were made? And also, what's the price of this thing? And I can't tell you guys that just yet, but let me tell you, it's actually not as insane as you'd expect. I mean, not too many of them were sold, but still, it's not as wild as you expect. But actually, before we get into the history of this car, I want to tell you guys how much this thing weighs, because this right here weighs 975 pounds. 975 pounds. Because this thing weighs less than, like, probably that Porsche 911 ST right there. Like, that's supposed to be the lightest new Porsche you could buy, but this is as light as, like, literally this, 3 of them are as heavy as one of that car. So it's not that that's heavy, it's that this is wildly light. But I mean, that is seriously light, which of course was a really good thing, and it helped it be competitive and actually quite successful at some things like the Sebring 12 hours and other races. So that was of course a really nice thing. And well, usually after I tell you guys about the specs of the car, I tell you guys about the history of the brand. But one really interesting thing about this car, or at least all Porsche-Elva Mark VIIs, is that, well, this was a collaboration between two companies, because, well, the chassis was made by a French company, and the engine was made by Porsche. And so, let's get into that now. So it all started in 1955, when a chap by the name of Frank Nicolas created his company, Elva, and actually in French, it means she goes. That's all it means. And the reason why it means that is because it pretty much signifies that the car is agile, it's quick, and, well, they were creating great chassis for these small sports prototype type of racing cars. And actually, right before I tell you guys about what happened, I just need to tell you guys, the 1960s was kind of like the golden age, I guess you could say, for club racing and endurance racing, and everyone wanted to come out with a lightweight, sporty car that people would love to buy, because people really loved that. But Elva, of course, wanted to offer something like that, because they knew they had great chassis, they just didn't have the proper engine, and that's when Frank Nicolas found out about the 1.7 liter air-cooled flat 4 that was powering the Porsche 356 and, well, the first, I guess you could say, concept 911. And actually, before the Elva team even found out about the 356 engine at the time, the flat 4, well, they actually had to work on 7 different iterations of the tubular space frame chassis, which are really tunable, lightweight, and are actually really good. But anyways, they had to work on 7 different variations of the chassis, and everyone pretty much got better suspension-wise, design-wise, rigidity-wise, lightness-wise, and so everyone was just like a huge leap forward. And, well, then, when they finally installed the engine, they had to design the body. And, of course, before they had carbon fiber, because the first racing cars to use carbon fiber were actually in the late 60s, early 70s. But anyways, the first racing cars to use carbon fiber for like everything, well, they were later on. And so this had to use a body completely made out of fiberglass. These days, fiberglass is a cheap material that a lot of people who want to build their own body kits and stuff like that use, because it's lightweight, it's cheap, and it's relatively easy to form. And so they created the beautiful little body of the car, and actually, I'll definitely applaud them for the design, because it looks really Porsche, I guess you could say. But anyways, they made it look really Porsche, even though Porsche had not really any direct hand in designing the car. Porsche did lend them the engine and sometimes give them advice on how they should tune it and stuff like that, but besides that, this was actually mainly an Elva creation. The entire body, the design, the chassis, and everything pretty much besides the engine were Elva. So it's still really cool, and I definitely applaud them for keeping the Porsche type of styling, because really, people wouldn't really think this is an Elva, because 1, a lot of people won't even know what an Elva is, and 2, well, I mean, it looks a lot like a Porsche. I mean, look at these headlights. It looks like a lot of older racing Porsches that had like better aerodynamics and stuff like that they try to make more sleek. I mean, if you look at this windshield, it looks Porsche type of styling. I mean, overall, this thing looks really like a Porsche, even though this is almost 85% a British car, because Elva is a British car company, or at least was. And so, I think I've told you guys everything you need to know about this car. Now, let me tell you guys just, well, 2 more things before you check out the design of this car. And, well, one of them is that this became really successful in SCCA racing, which is here in America. And, well, so I think I've told you guys everything you need to know about this car, from the specs, the design, and pretty much everything else. Now you guys are probably wondering, how much does this thing cost? Because, well, I mean, it's seriously rare, it's seriously cool, and we're going to be checking it out. And, well, this thing costs $90,000 to $150,000 plus. I mean, there's only 19 in the world, so literally I could count them on my fingers twice, which, I mean, is wildly rare, but still, they're not insanely expensive. The only problem is finding one, because, I mean, it's not that often that you come across one of 19 Porsche just for sale. And yeah, so I've told you guys everything you need to know of this car. Now let's take a closer look at the exterior and interior of this car. Okay, so now let's take a closer look at the exterior of this car. And of course, first thing first, let's start off with the front. And well, one thing I really like is you have, of course, these really nice headlights. I like how they covered them with this like aero cover, I guess you would call it. It's just literally plastic that's cut out and bolted on, but it's to help it have better aerodynamics. So when the air flows, it flows over the body smoothly instead of just hitting those lights almost like just like a straight up wall for worse aerodynamics. And then you also have these really nice air intakes right here that lead air like almost all the way through, as you can see. Like they go all the way under the hood and through the body of the car, so that's also really cool. And then you have Elva logo there, you have the Porsche logo here as well. And I actually really like how Elva and Porsche, like they're right on top of each other, even though this car is actually 85% Elva, which is a British car company, and it's only like 10% Porsche, because the engine is Porsche, but the chassis, the design, and pretty much everything else is British Elva, so that is also quite interesting. And then you come to the wheels, and you have these really cool black wheels, and they're not center locking because that was invented later, like in the 80s, but well, you have, let's see, 6 bolts here, and really lightweight alloy rims, which were really popular back then in the old racing car period to keep down weight, but these days a lot of the time it's more carbon fiber and stuff like that. But yeah, it's also really cool. And then you have Dunlop Racing, which was some of the main racing tires back in the day. These days it's the Pirelli P0s and stuff like that that are the main racing tires, but back in the day it was Dunlop. And then you actually have your fuel filler cap right here, which is also quite funny because check that out. You have to insert a key right there to open it, and it just like pops open like this, which is also quite cool. And it's so low, like you have to just bend over to get it in there. And yeah, then you also have this, which really I don't even know what this is for. It seems like you could pull it up and pull it out, but I'm not exactly sure what that would be for. It looks quite interesting though. Only explainable thing would be probably for the hood, but anyways, that is also quite nice. And then you have these extremely tiny doors. Like, look at how small this thing is, and it actually opens like this. It almost falls down, which is quite weird. And yeah, so that is also quite cool. And you also have this really cool windshield, which I like how this is actually made of plexiglass, not glass, so that it's more lightweight. But I like how they formed it to like almost bend a little higher right over the steering wheel, so it covers the driver's face from the wind a little more, even though they did wear racing helmets. And then also with the rear view mirror, look at how strange that is. I've never seen a weirder rear view mirror because it's literally mounted straight in the center of the car. It's not on the sides like you'd usually expect, but straight in the center. So that is also quite interesting, and we'll check out the interior a little later, but let's keep checking out the exterior of this car. And then also you have the badging here, number 32, which is also quite cool. You have some air intakes right here, as you can see. Let me come on this side, and it's kind of just cut out because it leads the air into the engine straight like this, and it's actually mid-engine, so it's not rear engine, but it's mid-engine, which pretty much means instead of the engine being mounted right here, like on a Porsche 911, it's mounted right here, more like on a Porsche Cayman or Porsche Boxster, which are the only current Porsches to have a rear engine. So that is also quite interesting. Then you also have this little like red circular rear light, since you didn't need those too much besides when you were braking. So that is also a cool little like old school type of hint. And then I see those again, 2 of them. I'm assuming they're hood clamps. That's the only, I feel like, logical thing that they would be, but it's quite interesting that they mount right there. So that is also quite cool. And then also, another thing that a lot of people probably will be wondering is, why does it just seem like there's these air outtakes, but what do they do? And it's actually because the engine heats up, and so these let the hot air from the engine flow out, which is also quite nice. And then you also have right here this little like air outtake up here, and it actually gives you like a little glimpse into the engine bay. It's quite hard to see, but you have a little glimpse into the engine bay via that. And actually, one thing that I actually just found kind of funny is that, check this out, these two air intakes, or air outtakes, I guess you would call them, they almost seem like the kidney grill on BMWs, like newer BMWs from the 70s and onwards. So that was also quite an interesting hint. And then I want to talk about this. Check this out. This is seriously strange. I doubt you guys have ever seen an exhaust bigger and weirder than that, but the reason why it looks like that is actually because, I mean, like I told you guys earlier, this is a 356 engine, and actually you could go to Ferdinand Porsche, or Ferry Porsche, when they first started the company, and you could ask them to make a custom exhaust, because there was 356s with exhausts that were sticking to here, that had, like, literally, the exhaust tips were sticking all the way out here. So this is actually more set back than you'd regularly see on the more tuned up Porsches, so that is also quite interesting. And actually, you could actually see that these are four different, as you can see here, four different tubes, and they all connect into one humongous tube. A lot of cars these days just let all those tubes stick out, but I'm actually quite fond of the way it looks with just one tube there. So that is also quite nice. And then also, I'm a huge fan of this color, which, as you guys know, if you guys are Porsche enthusiasts, is called GT Silver Metallic. It was really popular on the older race cars from the 1960s, like mid-1960s to later, because, I mean, a lot of the time they didn't want to have to paint their car like some extravagant color. So this was a really popular choice, and it kind of signified, it was easier to tell that this was a Porsche, just like Rosa Red is for Ferrari. Kind of GT Silver Metallic is for Porsche, so that is also quite cool. And actually, you could see there's like air intakes here as well. As you can see, there's a curved one right here, which you probably get the best glimpse of the engine bay that you can. And then on both sides, you have these quite cool like little air intakes or air outtakes. I'm not sure exactly what that's for, but that is also quite cool, and you can see those shiny carburetors under there, so that is quite nice. And also, you guys have probably noticed that this is kind of like a bulging up almost, which it looks, I mean, relatively interesting, and the reason why is because, I mean, this thing is so low, like literally, look at this. This isn't even to my waist, so this thing is wildly low, like this is lower than two Bugatti Chiron's almost, so that, of course, is quite wild. But the reason why they needed this bulge is so that they could fit the engine, because, I mean, the engine wouldn't even fit in such a low space like this, and it's slanting, so that was the easiest way to incorporate the engine. And I just want to talk about one more thing before we hop inside, which is the interesting headrest. And actually, the reason why the headrest is like this is, as I think this is actually aftermarket, because you could buy these online, like aftermarket headrests. It didn't originally come with this, but, well, these are because there was no headrest down here. Usually on your car you'll have headrests here, but here, no. A lot of old school cars under the 1970s, at least old school racing cars, didn't even have seatbelts or headrests. So that was quite interesting, and that's why the owner put this on so that, I mean, they could drive comfortably, which, of course, is quite smart. But I've noticed that actually it made the car not be able to have a passenger, because if you look here, this blocks the passenger from even getting in, because the bar is completely covering the seat. But you could actually take it out with some specific bolts, which of course is a nice little thing to have. And you could just take this off if you wanted to, this bar right here. It gives extra rigidity, but if you wanted a passenger, that of course is easier to take off. And, well, I just want to tell you guys one more thing before we hop inside, which is this right here. Check this out. There's like there's keyholes right here, and you need to open that up, or actually those are screws. You need to open up those screws, and, well, that gives you a little storage compartment, and usually they'd store their tires and stuff like that, their extra oil, extra fuel, and stuff like that. So that is a nice little feature to have. So now I think we've checked out all of the extra of this car. Now let's hop inside. Okay, so now we're gonna get inside this wild car, and so you have to just pull this, pop it down, and then.
Eventually.
And now we're inside, and you have, of course, the Porsche badging here. This thing is wild to be inside, like it's so tight, and you have the little 5-speed transmission there. You have RPM, UPM, you have oil, you have more oil. Interesting, I have 2 oil gauges, and then you have red and orange lights there, which is also quite cool. Then you have Elva Cars LTD, and you can see who it's made for and everything, so that is also quite nice. Then you also have that right there, the fire extinguisher, which is also quite cool. And well, inside of here, it's quite the fit. I mean, it's pretty tight for me. I don't know how other people fit, but you have your mirror right there, which is also quite nice. And then, of course, you have all your buttons here. You have that little red button. You have on and off. There's like kill switches, starter switches. You have all the cool different little lights. And then this, what is that? It says Imprevera. Interesting, so I don't know what that means, but it also shows you a little map of the transmission, so that is also quite cool. 5 speeds, and in reverse is the 6th, so that is also really cool. And inside of here, the seats are quite cozy, I could definitely tell you that. I can't really move around, so I don't really know how an adult would fit in here, but this, I mean, it's a really crazy experience. I can't really like put my head on the headrest, so it's just like this, but yeah, it's quite cool. And you have little like lettering here, you have little like letters like that there, which is also quite cool. You can see straight into the engine bay, which is also really, really cool. And then also you can see your roll cage right there, so that is quite nice. And then actually you can see the original structure there, which is really, really cool as well. And the front window also really want to talk about. Look at how low this thing is. Like literally, this front window, it's like literally, it would barely work for my face. This is how the airflow would go, like barely over my head. So I don't know if it would at all really work for an adult, but yeah, that is also really, really cool. And yeah, so the interior of this car, of course, is really simple because it's a racing sports car, and there's nice trim here. Actually plastic, interesting. An old school car having that plastic trim, but this thing is like completely stripped out, so that is of course really, really nice. And no one could really sit here, sadly, so we won't be able to drive this thing obviously, but you have this bar blocking the way here. And I actually like how this is made of like this leather type of material, so that is also quite nice. You have your racing harnesses here. It's a little too tight for me to put them on because I think I might not be able to get out of them, but still you have those really cool racing harnesses there. And I'll just give you guys the idea of what it'll look like with them on. So this is what it'll look like with them on in this extremely tight, not really spacious car. So that is also quite interesting. And the transmission also was borrowed from a Porsche. You see the old school Porsche logo there. So that is also quite cool. Okay, so let's hop out of this wild car, and I have to do like this.
6.5 hours later.
Put foot here and hop fast. So quite an interesting way, but let's close this back up and near the end of our video. So I hope you guys liked this video. Remember to like and subscribe to Xaaron Reviews, and see you all next time. And also, I hope you guys check out my X and Instagram accounts, which both I'll have in the link below, where I post some of the coolest car photography and car news that I know of. So I hope you guys liked this video. Remember to like and subscribe to Xaaron Reviews, and see you all next time.